Captain Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of Luna Station, watching another refugee transport ship dock at the loading bay. The war with the Vorthons had been over for 3 months, but ships full of displaced aliens still arrived every week. Each transport brought new stories of loss, new faces marked by tragedy, and new challenges for his small team to handle. Jake ran his hand through his brown hair and sighed. At 35, he had seen enough war during his time as a Marine on Earth. Now, as station commander of this frontier outpost, he thought he would find peace in the quiet work of helping refugees start new lives. Instead, he found himself dealing with trauma on a scale he had never imagined. "Captain, the new arrivals are ready for processing," said Lieutenant Amy Collins, his second in command. She held a data pad with the manifest. 43 refugees this time, mostly Kithani and Rillan families. Jake nodded and headed toward the processing center. The main hall buzzed with activity as his team worked to register the new arrivals. Families huddled together, speaking in soft voices in languages the translation devices struggled to interpret. Medical staff moved between them, checking for injuries and illnesses that were common after long journeys in cramped refugee ships. Dr. Lisa Warren, the station's psychologist, approached him with a concerned expression. She was a kind woman in her early 40s who had volunteered for this assignment, specifically to help war survivors heal from their experiences. "Jake, we have a problem with one of the arrivals," she said quietly. "A Kithani child came alone. No family, no guardians. The child won't speak to anyone and seems terrified of contact." Jake frowned. The Kithani were known for their strong family bonds and empathic abilities. Their crystalline bodies could sense and share emotions with others of their kind. A Kithani child traveling alone was unusual and deeply troubling. "Where is the child now?" Jake asked. "Medical bay, room 7. The child has been hiding behind the supply cabinet for the past 2 hours. We've tried everything we can think of, but nothing works." Jake followed Dr. Warren through the station's corridors. Luna Station had been built inside a large asteroid, and the hallways curved in gentle arcs that helped visitors feel less confined. The lighting was kept warm and soft to create a welcoming atmosphere, but Jake wondered if it made any difference to people who had lost everything. They entered the medical bay, and Dr. Warren pointed toward the far corner. Behind a tall cabinet, Jake could see a small figure pressed against the wall. The child's crystalline skin caught the light and threw tiny rainbows across the floor, but the beautiful effect was lost in the obvious fear radiating from the small body. "The child's name is Zix, according to the transport manifest," Dr. Warren explained. "Estimated age is equivalent to a 7-year-old human." The translator device the child carried was damaged, so we can't communicate directly. Jake crouched down and tried to get a better look at Zix. The child's large, multifaceted eyes reflected light like precious gems, but they were filled with terror. Zix's small hands clutched what looked like broken pieces of some kind of device. "Any idea what happened to the family?" Jake asked. The transport captain said Zix was found in the ruins of a crystal city on Cathara Prime. Rescue teams found the child 3 days after a Vorthon attack. No other survivors in that sector. Jake felt his chest tighten. He had seen too many children affected by war, but something about this small, frightened alien touched him deeply. Maybe it was the way Zix tried to make himself invisible, or the careful way the child held those broken pieces like they were the most precious things in the universe. "Has the child eaten anything?" Jake asked. "We've offered food, but Zix won't take it." Kithani children usually share meals through empathic connection with family members. Eating alone might feel wrong or frightening. Jake stood up and was about to suggest another approach when he heard a familiar sound in the hallway. The soft click of claws on metal flooring and happy panting meant his golden retriever puppy, Buddy, had escaped from his quarters again. Not now. "Buddy," Jake muttered as the 6-month-old puppy bounded into the medical bay. Buddy was a gift from Jake's sister back on Earth, meant to provide companionship during the long, lonely months on Luna Station. The puppy had a talent for getting into places he wasn't supposed to be. Dr. Warren moved to catch Buddy before he could disturb the frightened alien child. But something unexpected happened. Instead of running away, Zix stopped trembling and watched the puppy with intense curiosity. Buddy, completely unaware of the delicate situation, trotted over to a corner of the room and began chasing his own tail in the unconscious way that puppies do. His golden fur caught the light, and his tongue hung out as he spun in happy circles. For the first time since arriving, Zix moved. The child crawled slightly forward, still hidden behind the cabinet, but close enough to get a better view of the strange, furry creature. Jake and Dr. Warren exchanged glances. In all their experience with traumatized refugees, they had never seen anything like this. The child, who had been too frightened to acknowledge any living being, was now completely focused on a puppy, playing by himself. Buddy finished chasing his tail and noticed the new audience. Instead of approaching directly, the puppy lay down on the floor about 10 feet away from Zix's hiding place. He rested his head on his paws and watched the alien child with the patient, accepting gaze that dogs seem to master naturally. Minutes passed in silence. Zix slowly reached out one crystalline hand, not toward the puppy, but as if testing the air between them. The child's empathic abilities must have been sensing something from Buddy that felt different from the complex emotions of the grieving adults around the station. "Doctor," Jake said quietly, "what if we try something different?" "What do you mean?" "What if we let Buddy stay here for a while? Not as therapy exactly, but just to see what happens." Dr. Warren looked uncertain. "Animals aren't allowed in medical facilities except for specific therapy programs. The regulations are very clear." "The regulations weren't written for situations like this," Jake replied. "Look at Zix. This is the first sign of interest the child has shown in anything." As if understanding the conversation, Buddy yawned and settled more comfortably on the floor. His tail wagged gently against the metal flooring, making a soft rhythmic sound that seemed to calm the air in the room. Zix made a small sound, barely audible but clearly different from the frightened silence of before. It was a musical note rising and falling like a question. Buddy's ears perked up, and he tilted his head in the universal dog expression of curious attention. For the first time since the transport ship had docked, Captain Jake Morrison felt a small spark of hope. 3 days had passed since Buddy's unexpected introduction to Zix, and the changes were small, but remarkable. Jake made it a point to bring the puppy to the medical bay during his daily rounds, always carrying official reports as an excuse for the visits. Dr. Warren had initially worried about breaking protocol, but even she couldn't argue with the results. Zix no longer hid behind the cabinet when people entered the room. Instead, the alien child would wait in the corner, watching for the golden blur of fur that meant Buddy was nearby. Jake sat at his desk in the command center, reviewing supply requests and refugee placement reports. His mind kept wandering to the strange little family developing in Medical Bay 7. Through the security cameras, he could see Zix sitting cross-legged on the floor, about 6 feet away from where Buddy was napping in a patch of artificial sunlight. "Captain, you've been watching that feed for 20 minutes, Lieutenant Collins said with a knowing smile. "Maybe you should just go down there." Jake looked up from his screen, slightly embarrassed. "I'm monitoring the situation. It's my job to ensure the welfare of all refugees." "Right. And it has nothing to do with the fact that you've started carrying dog treats in your uniform pocket." Before Jake could respond, his communicator buzzed with an urgent message from Dr. Warren. "Jake, you need to get down here. Something's happening with Zix." Jake practically ran to the medical bay, his heart racing with worry. He found Dr. Warren standing outside room 7, her expression more amazed than concerned. "What's wrong?" Jake asked. "Nothing's wrong. Look." She gestured toward the observation window. Inside the room, Zix sat closer to Buddy than ever before. The alien child's crystalline hand was extended, hovering just inches above the puppy's golden fur. Buddy lay perfectly still, as if he understood the importance of the moment. "Zix has been reaching toward him for the past hour," Dr. Warren whispered, getting a little closer each time. "I think the child is going to make contact." Jake watched, barely breathing. He had seen the careful way Zix moved, always making sure not to accidentally touch anyone or anything. For a species known for empathic abilities, physical contact must carry incredible significance. Slowly, carefully, Zix's fingertips brushed against Buddy's fur. The puppy's tail gave a gentle wag, but he didn't move otherwise. Zix jerked the hand back, then tried again. This time the alien child's palm rested flat against Buddy's side. A soft musical sound filled the room. It was similar to the note Zix had made days earlier, but longer and more complex. The sound seemed to come from the child's crystalline body itself, resonating like a living wind chime. Buddy opened his eyes and looked at Zix with calm acceptance. His tail wagged more enthusiastically now, and he made a small, contented sound. That's the first time we've heard Zix make any extended vocalization, Dr. Warren said. The musical patterns might be a form of emotional expression that doesn't require the broken translator device. Jake entered the room quietly, not wanting to disturb the moment. Zix looked up at him with those large, gem-like eyes but didn't pull away from Buddy. "Hello, Zix," Jake said softly. He sat down on the floor several feet away, making himself less imposing. "I'm Jake. This is my friend Buddy." At the sound of his name, Buddy's tail wagged harder, which made Zix create another string of musical notes. These sounded different, lighter, almost like laughter. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out one of the dog treats Lieutenant Collins had noticed. "Buddy likes these," he said, showing the treat to Zix. "Would you like to give him one?" Zix tilted their head in a gesture that seemed universal across species, curiosity mixed with uncertainty. Jake placed the treat on the floor halfway between himself and Zix, then moved back. "You can give it to him if you want. He's very gentle." The alien child looked at the treat, then at Buddy, then at Jake. Slowly, Zix picked up the small biscuit and held it out toward the puppy. Buddy approached carefully, taking the treat with unusual gentleness. He crunched it happily, his tail creating a steady rhythm against the floor. This time, Zix's musical sounds were definitely joyful. The child reached out and touched Buddy's head, running crystalline fingers through the soft fur. Buddy leaned into the touch, closing his eyes with contentment. "I think," Dr. Warren said quietly from the doorway, "we're witnessing something remarkable. Zix is responding to Buddy's emotional simplicity. Dogs don't carry the complex trauma and stress that we humans do. For an empathic child, Buddy's emotions must feel like a safe harbor." Jake watched as Zix continued to pet Buddy, both of them seeming perfectly content with each other's company. "What do you recommend for next steps?" "I'd like to try structured interaction time. Maybe an hour each morning and evening where you bring Buddy here. We can gradually introduce other elements, food, play, basic communication exercises." "And the regulations about animals in medical facilities?" Dr. Warren smiled. "I'm recommending Buddy for official therapy animal status. Emergency authorization for unprecedented circumstances." Over the following days, the routine developed naturally. Jake would arrive each morning with Buddy and a simple breakfast. Nothing fancy, just bread and fruit that could be shared easily. Zix remained hesitant about eating at first, but seemed to understand that Jake and Buddy were offering to share their meal rather than forcing food on an unwilling child. The breakthrough came on the 5th day. Jake was sitting with his back against the wall, Buddy curled up beside him, sharing pieces of an apple. Zix sat nearby, watching but not participating. Jake took a bite of apple and made an exaggerated sound of enjoyment. Good apple." He offered a piece to Buddy, who crunched it happily. Then Jake held out a piece toward Zix. The alien child looked at the offered food, then at Jake's face, then at Buddy's contented expression. Slowly, Zix reached out and took the apple slice. The first bite was tentative, but the second was more confident. Zix's musical sounds took on a new quality, satisfaction mixed with something that might have been gratitude. "Good?" Jake asked. Zix nodded, a gesture that seemed to translate across species lines. Then the child did something unexpected. Zix picked up another piece of apple and offered it to Buddy. As the puppy gently took the fruit from Zix's crystalline fingers, Jake realized they had crossed an important threshold. This wasn't just about one traumatized child finding comfort with a friendly animal. This was about learning to trust again, to share again, to be part of a family again. That evening, Jake stayed later than usual. Zix had fallen asleep curled up next to Buddy, one small hand resting on the puppy's side. The soft rise and fall of Buddy's breathing seemed to calm the alien child in a way that no medical treatment had managed. Dr. Warren joined Jake in the observation room. The changes in Zix's stress indicators are remarkable. Heart rate, brain activity, even the color patterns in the crystalline skin, everything suggests significant improvement. "Any word from the Galactic Council about permanent placement?" Jake asked. "They're still processing applications for foster families among the Cathani refugee communities. But Jake," she paused, looking uncomfortable. "Most Cathani families are still dealing with their own trauma. Finding someone ready to take on a child with Zix's level of damage might take time." Jake watched the sleeping pair through the window. "How much time?" Months, possibly longer. And there's no guarantee that separating Zix from this environment will be beneficial. The child has formed attachments here. That night, Jake lay in his quarters thinking about responsibility and attachment. He had signed up to command a space station, not to become a father figure to an alien child. But as he listened to Buddy's soft snoring from the foot of his bed, Jake realized that sometimes the most important decisions weren't the ones you planned to make. They were the ones that chose you. 2 weeks had passed since Zix first touched Buddy's fur, and the alien child had begun to show signs of real recovery. Jake found himself looking forward to their morning and evening sessions more than any other part of his day. The simple routine of sharing meals and watching Zix play with Buddy had become the highlight of his time on Luna Station. Today was different, though. Jake arrived at the medical bay to find Zix sitting in the center of the room, drawing on a data pad that Dr. Warren had provided. Buddy lay nearby, occasionally lifting his head to watch the child work. "Good morning, Zix," Jake said as he entered. The alien child looked up and made a brief musical greeting, then returned to the drawing. Dr. Warren joined them, carrying her usual morning coffee and a curious expression. "Zix has been working on that since dawn. I think it might be important." Jake sat down next to the child and looked at the screen. The drawing was simple but clear. Stick figures representing different species with Zix's crystalline form in the center. Around the edges were symbols that looked like broken pieces. "Can you tell us about your picture?" Jake asked gently. Zix put down the stylus and made a series of musical sounds, more complex than usual. The child pointed to the crystalline figure, then to themselves, then to the broken symbols around the edge. "Family," Dr. Warren said quietly. "I think Zix is trying to tell us about their family." The alien child nodded enthusiastically, then began to point to different parts of the drawing. Each stick figure seemed to represent a family member, and Zix's musical sounds changed tone and pitch as they indicated each one. Jake felt his throat tighten as he began to understand. "They're all gone, aren't they?" Zix's music became quieter, sadder. The child pointed to the broken symbols again, then made a gesture that could only mean explosion or destruction. "I'm sorry," Jake said, knowing the words were inadequate but needing to say them anyway. "I'm so sorry about your family." Zix looked at him with those large, reflective eyes, then did something unexpected. The child reached out and took Jake's hand, placing it on Buddy's head alongside their own crystalline fingers. "New family," Dr. Warren said softly. "I think Zix is telling us that you and Buddy are the new family." Jake felt a mix of honor and terror at the responsibility. He had cared for Buddy since the puppy was 8 weeks old, but caring for an alien child was entirely different. "Zix, are you sure?" "I'm not Cathani. I don't understand your people's ways." The child made a sound that might have been laughter, then began to draw again. This time the picture showed 3 figures, a human, a small crystalline being, and a 4-legged creature with a wagging tail. They were all holding hands or paws, connected in a simple chain of friendship. Over the following days, their communication improved dramatically. Zix began to learn basic human words while Jake and Dr. Warren learned to interpret the musical language of the Cathani. They discovered that different tones meant different emotions or concepts, and that the child could express surprisingly complex ideas through combinations of sounds and gestures. The breakthrough came when Buddy got sick. Jake arrived for their morning session to find the puppy listless and uninterested in food. Buddy's nose was warm and he moved slowly. Without his usual bouncing energy, "He's probably just tired," Jake said, trying to convince himself as much as Zix. Dogs get sleepy sometimes. But Zix became agitated, making urgent musical sounds and pointing at Buddy with obvious concern. The child approached the puppy and placed both hands on his side, closing their eyes in concentration. "Zix, what are you doing?" Dr. Warren asked. The alien child didn't respond, focused entirely on Buddy. Their crystalline skin began to glow softly, and the musical sounds took on a different quality, deeper, more resonant. After several minutes, Zix opened their eyes and looked directly at Dr. Warren. The child pointed to Buddy's stomach, then made a gesture indicating pain or discomfort. "You can sense what's wrong with him?" Jake asked. Zix nodded, then began to draw on the datapad again. The picture showed Buddy's internal anatomy with remarkable accuracy for a child, with a specific area marked in red. Dr. Warren examined the drawing, then looked at Buddy with new understanding. If Zix is right, this could be a blocked intestine. We need to get him to the veterinary section immediately. The medical scan confirmed Zix's diagnosis. Buddy had eaten something that caused a minor blockage, easily treatable but potentially serious if left unattended. Within hours, the puppy was back to his normal, energetic self. "How did you know?" Jake asked Zix as they sat together that evening. Buddy was sleeping peacefully between them, fully recovered. Zix made a series of soft musical sounds, then pointed to their own chest, then to Buddy's. The child seemed to be saying that they could feel what Buddy felt, share his experiences through their empathic abilities. "You helped him," Jake said. "You used your gift to help our friend." For the first time, Zix smiled. Not just the contented expression they wore when petting Buddy, but a real, joyful smile that lit up their crystalline features. That night, Jake received a priority message from Earth. The Galactic Council had been reviewing the refugee placement programs and wanted to transfer several children, including Zix, to specialized facilities on the home worlds of their respective species. Jake stared at the message for a long time, then walked to the observation deck where he could see Earth in the distance. The thought of separating Zix from their newly formed family felt wrong in every possible way. The child had been through enough loss already. He thought about regulations and proper procedures, about his duty as a station commander and his responsibility to follow orders. Then he thought about a small alien child who had found comfort in the simple love of a puppy, who had learned to trust again through shared meals and quiet conversations. Jake made his decision. The next morning, he filed a formal request with the Galactic Council. He wanted to apply as Zix's permanent guardian, creating an official interspecies family unit. The request included detailed reports from Dr. Warren about Zix's recovery, video logs of their daily interactions, and testimony from every staff member on Luna Station about the positive changes they had witnessed. "Are you sure about this?" Dr. Warren asked when Jake told her about the application. Raising a Cathani child will be challenging. Their empathic abilities require special understanding and care. Jake looked through the window of the medical bay, where Zix was teaching Buddy to sit in exchange for treats. The alien child's patient, gentle approach with the puppy showed a maturity and kindness that touched Jake's heart. "I'm sure," he said. "They've already taught me more about patience and resilience than I ever knew. Besides, we're not just a human raising an alien child. We're a family figuring things out together." That evening, as they shared their usual dinner, Jake tried to explain to Zix what he had done. The concept of adoption and legal guardianship was complex, but Zix seemed to understand the essential meaning. The alien child looked at Jake for a long moment, then made a sound unlike any they had produced before. A rich, harmonious note that seemed to encompass joy, gratitude, and belonging all at once. Then Zix reached out and hugged Jake, the first time the child had initiated physical contact with any human. As Jake held the small, crystalline form and felt Buddy's warm weight against his leg, he realized that sometimes family wasn't about biology or species. Sometimes it was about choosing to care for each other, about finding comfort in simple moments, and about the courage to open your heart to love again after loss. The paperwork for the adoption request sat on his desk, waiting to be sent. But in that moment, holding his alien child while their puppy slept peacefully beside them, Jake knew that the family had already been formed long before any official documents could make it legal. The message arrived 3 weeks after Jake had submitted his adoption request, and it wasn't the response he had hoped for. Commander Helen Price of the Galactic Council would be arriving at Luna Station within 48 hours to conduct a full evaluation of their refugee programs and investigate the irregular placement of the Cathani child, known as Zix. Jake read the official notification twice, his stomach sinking with each word. Irregular placement. That's what they called his family now. How bad is this? Lieutenant Collins asked as she reviewed the message over his shoulder. Bad, Jake admitted. Commander Price has a reputation for following regulations to the letter. She's not known for flexibility or creative solutions. Dr. Warren joined them in the command center, looking worried. Zix has been asking about the increased security preparations. The child's empathic abilities pick up on stress very easily. Should we explain what's happening? Jake considered this. Over the past month, Zix had become remarkably perceptive about the emotions of everyone on the station. The alien child often approached staff members who were having difficult days, offering simple comfort through musical sounds or by bringing Buddy to sit with them. We'll tell Zix the truth, Jake decided, but in a way that doesn't create panic. Just that someone important is coming to visit and learn about our program here. That evening, as they shared dinner in what had become their unofficial family quarters, Jake tried to prepare Zix for the upcoming inspection. "Zix, tomorrow a very important person is coming to visit Luna Station," he said carefully. "She wants to learn about how we take care of refugees here." The alien child looked up from where they were teaching Buddy to balance a treat on his nose. Zix's crystalline features reflected concern, and their musical response carried notes of worry. "Will she want to take me away?" Zix asked in the careful human words they had been learning. Jake's heart clenched at the direct question. He had promised himself never to lie to Zix, but the truth was frightening even to him. "I don't know what she'll decide, but I want you to know that Buddy and I will do everything we can to stay together as a family." Zix was quiet for a moment, then made a decision that surprised Jake. The child stood up and hugged him tightly, then knelt down to hug Buddy as well. "We are family," Zix said firmly, "no matter what happens." Commander Price arrived exactly on schedule, accompanied by 2 assistants and enough official documentation to justify a small bureaucracy. She was a stern woman in her 50s, with steel gray hair and the kind of bearing that came from decades of military service. Jake met her at the docking bay with full ceremonial honors, hoping to start their relationship on a positive note. "Commander Price, welcome to Luna Station. I'm Captain Morrison." "Captain," she replied with a crisp nod. "I trust you've reviewed the purpose of my visit. The Galactic Council has received concerning reports about non-standard procedures in your refugee program." "Yes, ma'am. I'm prepared to provide full documentation and access to all facilities." "Good. I'll want to interview your staff, review case files, and most importantly, evaluate the situation with the Cathani child. The Council has serious concerns about interspecies adoption without proper oversight." Over the next 6 hours, Commander Price conducted a thorough inspection that left no stone unturned. She reviewed every regulation, questioned every decision, and scrutinized every aspect of Luna Station's operations. Jake found himself defending not just his choices regarding Zix, but his entire approach to refugee care. "Your methods are highly irregular, Captain," she said as they concluded the formal review. "Allowing personal pets in medical facilities, forming emotional attachments with refugee children, bypassing established placement protocols. These actions show poor judgment." "With respect, Commander, our results speak for themselves. We have the highest successful integration rate of any frontier station, and our refugees report significantly lower levels of ongoing trauma." "Statistics can be manipulated, Captain. What matters is following proper procedures to ensure the safety and welfare of vulnerable populations." That afternoon, Commander Price requested a private meeting with Zix. Jake wanted to be present, but regulations required that the interview be conducted without the potential guardian present. Jake waited outside the conference room, pacing nervously while Buddy sat beside the door, sensing his anxiety. Through the window he could see Zix sitting across from Commander Price, answering questions with the careful precision the child had developed when speaking human languages. The interview lasted over an hour. When it ended, Zix emerged looking tired and subdued. The child walked straight to Jake and buried their face against his uniform, seeking comfort. "How did it go?" Jake asked softly. "She asked many questions," Zix replied. "About before, about family, about you and Buddy." I tried to answer correctly. Commander Price appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Captain Morrison, I'll need to review my notes before making any final determinations. However, I must inform you that my preliminary assessment suggests that this placement is not in the child's best interests." Jake felt his world shift. "Commander, if I could explain, the child needs to be with their own species, Captain. The Galactic Council has identified several Cathani families willing to provide proper cultural education and empathic development training. This attachment to a human and a pet animal may seem beneficial in the short term, but it prevents proper integration with Cathani society." That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He walked the corridors of Luna Station, thinking about regulations and best interests and the sound of Zix's laughter, when Buddy did something particularly silly. He was considering his limited options when the emergency alarm sounded. "Captain, to the docking bay immediately." came Lieutenant Collins's voice over the comm. "We have incoming refugees with medical emergencies." Jake ran to the docking bay to find chaos. A damaged transport ship had limped to Luna Station carrying 37 refugees, including several who were badly injured. Among them were 8 Cathani adults and children, all showing signs of severe empathic overload from the trauma of their escape. The medical bay quickly filled with patients, and the air became thick with pain, fear, and desperation. The Cathani refugees were particularly affected, their empathic abilities making them absorb and amplify the suffering of everyone around them. Dr. Warren worked frantically to provide medical care, but the emotional chaos was making it impossible for the empathic aliens to heal properly. "Jake, I need to separate the Cathani patients, but we don't have enough isolated rooms. Their empathic feedback is creating a cycle of escalating trauma." Jake was about to suggest moving patients to other sections when he saw something remarkable happening in the corner of the main medical bay. Zix had entered the room, despite orders to stay in their quarters during emergencies. The child walked calmly through the chaos, apparently unaffected by the emotional turmoil that was overwhelming the adult Cathani. Zix approached the most distressed Cathani patient, a young adult who was curled in a ball, making sounds of distress. The child sat down beside the patient and began to make soft, steady musical sounds, not the random notes of conversation, but a deliberate, rhythmic pattern that seemed to cut through the emotional noise. Gradually, the adult Cathani's distress began to ease. Others nearby also started to calm, drawn to the stability that Zix provided. Jake watched in amazement as his small alien child became an anchor point for the entire group, offering emotional stability that even Dr. Warren's medical treatments couldn't provide. Commander Price had been observing from the doorway, her face showing the first crack in her stern composure that Jake had seen since her arrival. "How is the child doing that?" she asked quietly. Zix learned to manage empathic input through exposure to simple, stable emotions, Dr. Warren explained while continuing to treat patients. The relationship with Jake and Buddy taught the child how to find emotional balance. Now Zix can provide that same stability to others. For the next 4 hours, Zix worked alongside the medical team, helping to calm traumatized refugees and facilitate healing. The child showed a maturity and capability that impressed everyone present, including the stern Commander Price. As dawn broke over Luna Station, the crisis had passed. All patients were stable, and the Cathani refugees were resting peacefully. Zix had fallen asleep curled up next to Buddy in the corner of the medical bay, exhausted from hours of empathic work. Commander Price stood looking at the sleeping pair, her expression thoughtful. "Captain Morrison, I believe we need to have another conversation about this placement." Jake nodded, hope beginning to stir in his chest. "Yes, ma'am. I think we do." 6 months later, Jake stood in the same observation deck where he had first watched refugee ships arrive, but everything had changed. Luna Station had become something unprecedented in Galactic Council history, the first official interspecies family integration center, and he had just received confirmation that 5 other frontier stations were requesting similar programs. The transformation had begun with Commander Price's revised report. After witnessing Zix's remarkable ability to help other traumatized refugees, she had recommended not only approving Jake's adoption request, but establishing Luna Station as a pilot program for innovative refugee care approaches. The traditional model assumes that refugees heal best when placed with families of their own species, Commander Price had written in her final report. However, the case of Zix demonstrates that some orphans may benefit more from carefully constructed, interspecies family units that provide emotional stability and practical support. Jake smiled as he watched the latest group of refugees disembark from their transport ship. Among them were 3 children, a human girl whose parents had been lost in a mining accident, a young Rilan whose family had died in the same Vorthon attack that claimed Zix's clan, and a small Andorian whose empathic abilities had been damaged by trauma. In the docking bay below, he could see Zix waiting with Buddy, now a full-grown golden retriever whose gentle nature had become legendary among refugees. The alien child, Jake still thought of Zix as a child, though at 8 years old, the Cathani was approaching adolescence, had become Luna Station's unofficial ambassador for newcomers. "Captain, the new arrivals are ready for initial processing," Lieutenant Collins reported. She had been promoted to commander 6 months ago when Jake was offered a position as director of the new interspecies family program. Thank you, Commander. Has Dr. Warren finished the psychological assessments? Almost. She wants to introduce the children to Zix and Buddy before making final placement recommendations. Jake nodded and headed toward the processing center. The facility had been expanded significantly, with new family quarters designed to accommodate mixed species households and a therapy center where animals like Buddy could work with traumatized refugees. He found Dr. Warren in the main hall with the 3 new children. The human girl, Katie, stood close to the wall, her arms wrapped around herself in a defensive posture. The young Reelan, whose name translated roughly as Whisper, sat on the floor with his eyes closed, overwhelmed by the emotions of the other refugees. The small Andorian Echo rocked gently back and forth, their damaged empathic abilities creating confusion and distress. How are they doing? Jake asked quietly. About what we'd expect, Dr. Warren replied. Katie is showing signs of attachment disorder, afraid to trust anyone after losing her parents. Whisper is dealing with survivors' guilt and empathic overload. Echo's trauma has disrupted their natural empathic development, creating a feedback loop of emotional confusion. Sounds familiar, Jake said, remembering his first meeting with Zix. That's why I thought they might benefit from meeting our success story. As if summoned by their conversation, Zix appeared in the doorway with Buddy at their side. The alien adolescent had grown taller over the past months, their crystalline features developing the more angular appearance of adult Cathani. But their eyes still held the gentle wisdom that had helped so many refugees find peace. Hello, Zix said in the clear human speech they had mastered. I'm Zix and this is Buddy. We live here with my dad, Jake. The casual way Zix referred to Jake as dad still made his heart skip a beat. The adoption had been finalized 3 months ago in a ceremony that included representatives from both human and Cathani governments, making their family legally recognized across multiple worlds. Katie looked up at the strange pair with cautious curiosity. Is that really your dad? But you're an alien. Family isn't about what species you are, Zix replied with the patient tone of someone who had answered this question many times. It's about who takes care of you and loves you. Buddy, sensing the children's distress, approached slowly and lay down in the center of the group. His presence seemed to ease the tension in the room, just as it had for Zix so many months ago. Whisper opened his eyes and looked at the golden dog with wonder. His emotions are so simple, peaceful. That's what helped me when I first came here, Zix explained. Buddy's feelings are easy to understand, just happiness and love and wanting to help. When everything else feels too complicated, his emotions feel safe. Echo stopped rocking and reached out tentatively toward Buddy's fur. The dog remained perfectly still, allowing the small Andorian to touch him gently. He likes you, Zix said encouragingly. Buddy likes everyone, but he's especially good with people who are hurting. Over the following weeks, Jake watched the same transformation begin with the new children that he had witnessed with Zix. Katie slowly learned to trust again through structured interactions with Buddy and regular family meals with Jake and Zix. Whisper found that Buddy's simple, emotional presence helped him manage his empathic overload, allowing him to gradually reconnect with other people. Echo's damaged empathic abilities began to heal through gentle exposure to the stable emotional environment that Jake, Zix, and Buddy provided. It's remarkable, Dr. Warren told Jake during one of their weekly evaluation meetings. We're seeing success rates that traditional placement programs can't match. The combination of interspecies perspectives, animal therapy, and stable family structures is creating something entirely new. Any word from the Galactic Council about expanding the program? 5 more stations have been approved for pilot programs, and there's talk of establishing a training center for interspecies family facilitators. Jake, what you started here is becoming a movement. That evening, Jake sat in their family quarters, a suite of rooms that had been designed to accommodate their unique household. Zix was helping Katie with her homework while Buddy supervised from his favorite spot on the couch. Whisper and Echo were in their own quarters nearby, but they often joined the family for meals and activities. Dad, Zix said, looking up from the data pad where Katie was practicing basic math. Do you think we're making a difference? Jake looked around the room at this strange, wonderful family they had created. 6 months ago, he had been a lonely station commander with a puppy for company. Now he was the father of an alien adolescent, guardian to 3 more refugee children, and director of a program that was changing how the galaxy thought about family and healing. "Yes," he said simply, "I think we're making a very big difference." Zix smiled, their crystalline features reflecting the warm light of their home. "Good, because Buddy and I have been talking, and we think there's room for more family members if any other children need us." Jake laughed, realizing that his alien child had developed the same rescue instinct that had led him to file that first adoption request. "We'll see what happens. But you're right. There's always room for more love in a family." That night, as Jake tucked Zix into bed and made sure Buddy was comfortable in his usual spot at the foot of the alien child's sleeping alcove, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a terrified refugee child, a curious puppy, and a decision to ignore regulations in favor of compassion. Now it was becoming something much larger, a new understanding of how healing happened, how families formed, and how the simple act of caring for each other could bridge any differences between species. Through the window of their quarters, Jake could see Earth in the distance, no longer the distant home he remembered, but one part of a larger community that included dozens of worlds and hundreds of species. Somewhere out there, other stations were beginning their own interspecies family programs. Other children were finding comfort with families that didn't look like them, and other animals were providing the simple, unconditional love that seemed to be a universal language of healing. As Zix's breathing settled into the gentle rhythm of sleep, and Buddy's tail thumped softly against the bed in contentment, Jake realized that sometimes the most important changes in the universe started with the smallest acts of kindness. A scared child, a friendly puppy, and a human willing to open his heart had created ripples that were now spreading across the galaxy. In the morning, there would be new refugees arriving, new children who needed families, and new opportunities to prove that love truly was the most powerful force in the universe. But tonight, Jake Morrison fell asleep surrounded by his family, grateful for the day when a shy alien orphan had found comfort thanks to a human and a puppy, and had taught them all what it really meant to belong.